I'm so excited to welcome you all to Happy Go Lucky at Heart podcast. I have a mission to support others with undiagnosed autism to get a diagnosis because my mum fought a long battle. But please don't go, because this podcast is for absolutely everybody, especially mental health too. And I mean everybody, because I will share with you lots of unique yet personal stories from all age groups. So please meet your host, Vicky Kidson, otherwise known as me. Buckle up, because it's going to be a long mission. So enjoy and live life to the full. Hi, so on today's show is Dr. Anthony Chaffee. Years and years of experience in his field, carnivore. He's going to talk about the benefits of carnivore. If you follow him on his Instagram and pages, he doesn't agree with the vegan lifestyle, and he thinks when you're vegan you kill more animals because you're destroying habitats, and you're destroying so many habitats and wildlife. So within 50 years of everyone vegan, just think we won't have much wildlife to appreciate because of all the disruption of crop growing and ploughing up fields. And also, vegan lifestyle actually causes more harm for the environment because you got air miles, and with carnivore you can live off local meat. And with the vegan lifestyle, you have to live off imported fruit and veg from other countries. And also, you see cows in the field, and with the vegan point of view, they want cows to be gone. And some of the things Dr. Anthony has mentioned with veganism lifestyle, they want to replace natural environment with chemicals and processed products. It's strange to think this is natural. And we talk about how our ancestors have been on this diet, and just with it's the natural human evolved diet, and it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. I've stopped this lifestyle at the minute because I'm just limiting my caffeine intake, and then I might start again, because I found the carb withdrawal for you go because you're limited your carb intake and you're so reliant on carbs, your brain goes through withdrawals. But once you've passed that, you won't look back. So I found the carb withdrawals and caffeine withdrawals too much. But I'm still on keto. So please welcome Dr. Anthony. So tell my listeners about yourself and what you do and how long you have been following the carnivore.
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Anthony Chaffee. I'm an American medical doctor currently working in Australia in my neurosurgical residency, and I also have a practice in functional medicine and metabolic health. And I've been studying diet and nutrition and how that affects health and chronic disease for around the last 24, 25 years. And I've come to the conclusion that humans are carnivores, and the type of animal we are carnivores. And like all animals in the wild, when you stick to your species specific diet that is appropriate for your species, that you are generally going to find that you'll be more healthy. And so I've started practicing that as well. I've been doing that for, well, starting about 23 years ago, and then for a solid 5 years, then mostly meat based. And then the last 6 years have been exclusively just meat, salt, and water. And I've found that during those periods where I'm just eating meat, salt, and water, I've never been healthier, never felt better, never performed better athletically. And I find that I'm getting the same results in my patients and people that I've counseled as well. So it's something that I've done a lot of research in, and is a growing area of medicine, just metabolic health in general, and it fits directly in with that new practice of metabolic health, which is a growing area of medicine and is quite successful in many ways.
What motivates prompted you to start carnivore?
Yeah, so when I first started, it wasn't the same motivations as now. Now I look at our biology and our history and prehistory, where our ancestors were almost exclusively eating meat. Maybe they were eating some plants sometimes they needed to or wanted to, but predominantly they just ate meat. And that's what all of the best evidence shows, going back about 2 million to even to 3 million years, that our ancestors were eating near exclusively meat. And so, how I came about that was not just seeing that and saying, oh, well, we're hunters and we're carnivores and we're predators and apex predators, top of the food chain, is something that we have known for many, 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 many centuries, millennia. But from the simple fact that I was taking biology and botany and cancer biology in my undergraduate degree at the University of Washington in Seattle, and we are just learning about how plants are really the dominant life forms on this planet. The vast majority of the biomass on Earth is plant life, and they're under constant assault by animals and insects trying to eat them. So how can they be a dominant life form if they're just constantly being shredded by animals? The reason being is that they have very robust defenses, and some of those defenses are just being making different chemicals that can kill or seriously disable or inconvenience animals and insects from eating them, sometimes being just directly poisonous, other times disrupting their hormones, other times stopping them from being able to absorb and utilize nutrients. So there's a lot of different things that they can do just to stop animals from eating them. And I was learning this just from a cancer perspective when I took cancer biology. And we learned right away that things like Brussels sprouts had 136 known carcinogens in them, and that mushrooms had over 100, but also spinach, kale, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, all the different sorts of produce that we would eat on a regular basis, all had dozens, if not over 100 known human carcinogens each. And they were quite abundant. There were over 10,000 times more naturally occurring carcinogens and pesticides, naturally occurring pesticides that the plants use to stop animals and insects from eating them, than the pesticides we spray on them industrially. So 10,000 times more by weight. This was seen in a study done by Professor Bruce Ames from UC Berkeley in 1989. And he also found that the naturally occurring poisons in these different plants, he was looking specifically at mushrooms in this study, that, just white table mushrooms that we would normally eat, that they were 500 times more likely to cause cancer in animal models than the pesticides that they were studying at the time too, called ALAR, which was something they were actually trying to ban and get rid of. And then when this research came out, I said, okay, well, plants are worse than the pesticides. So obviously that's not a major concern. If you're going to eat the plant, the pesticide is a drop in the bucket compared to that. So we learned that and were literally blown away. We were looking around wildly to try to find like a TA or someone in the corner, like laughing and saying like, thinking this is a joke or something. But we realized that he wasn't joking and that no one was in on the joke. And so I remember thinking in my head, like, wow, that is crazy. Aren't vegetables still good for you though? And just at that moment, he just looked at us and gave us a funny look and he just said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables.
So plants are trying to kill us.
Yeah. He said, like, I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. So it's like, okay, fine. Stop eating plants. So I just defaulted into a carnivore diet just because like I wasn't going to eat any plants. And so I went to the grocery store directly after that. And I was just trying to find what I could eat. And, just everything had plants in it. And so I just defaulted into eating eggs and meat because I was just trying to find something besides a plant. And so I did that for years and years and years. I literally never felt better. And I remember when I sort of slipped away from that, not realizing how significant what I was doing was, I always look back on that period of my life as like, I literally felt like just superhuman. Athletically, I was I was just on a completely different level as compared to myself and everyone else. I mean, there's no one in better shape than I was, and there was no one that could do what I could do when I pushed myself, because I did push myself very hard. And because of that and because of my diet, I just excelled at just an exponential pace, and no one could keep up with that. And so I always look back at that like that was just crazy. Like how is that so different? And then 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I look back when I sort of came across information that was just like, no, humans really are carnivores. That's just the kind of animal that we are. And that's how we should be eating. And I was like, right, I knew it. I knew plants were trying to kill me. Like, get rid of these stupid things. And I looked back and I thought that was it. That during that period of my life, I was just eating as a carnivore. I was just a carnivore diet, and that must have been the difference because right after that, when I started incorporating some vegetables, not even sugar and pizza and all that sort of stuff, but just whole food vegetables and things like that. That's when things started not working as well. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why don't I just feel as superhuman amazing as I normally do? I didn't know why, but looking back on it, I was like, that was it. That was the difference. And so I dropped all the vegetables, just started eating exclusively meat, high fat meat, because fat's actually really good for you. And I felt again just better than I ever had. And so at that point I was 38 and I felt better than I did at 27 as a professional athlete, working out for 8 hours a day. So that's a big difference, made a big impact on my life.
So the fat, what's your view on cholesterol?
The idea that cholesterol causes heart disease was really brought about by industry research from the sugar companies back in the 50s and 60s, and it was really to hide their own involvement in the potential uprising of heart disease and other illnesses, because there was a direct correlation between the increased rate of consumption of processed refined sugar and heart disease, but also seed oils. Seed oils have a direct correlation with the rise in heart disease throughout the 20th century as well. Animal fat and cholesterol actually has an inverse relationship between the rise of heart disease. So as we're eating less and less and less animal fat, saturated fat, the heart disease is going up and up and up. And so there's actually no correlation even between heart disease and cholesterol and saturated fat. And the only studies that showed just a correlation, there's never been anything showing causation between cholesterol, saturated fat, and heart disease or stroke or any other cardiovascular issues. The only studies showing a correlation have all been shown now to have been fraudulent. The journal, UC San Francisco Medical School published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, in 2016, actual internal memos from the sugar companies back in that era talking about how, their own memos talking about how they paid off 3 Harvard professors to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol caused heart disease, using it as a scapegoat, and then to exonerate sugar and say that that was safe. And one of those professors was named head of the USDA, and it was he who authored and published the 1977 USDA declaration saying that cholesterol caused heart disease. And so that changed the world, because this was an official government recommendation. Of course, the government wants nothing but good things for us. And so they put this out there and everyone listened to it, and it shut down the debate. This was hotly debated for decades prior to this. And then as soon as the USDA stepped in and said, nope, this is what it is, it just shut down the conversation. And so these doctors and researchers that were saying, hey, look, this has nothing to do with fat cholesterol. We think this is more to do with sugar. They were like a Dr. Yudkin, who wrote a book on the subject in the 1970s. They were completely discredited and actually ruined their reputations and destroyed their careers falsely. And they knew it was false. They knew it was fraudulent. And we actually even know how much they paid. We have their contracts. They only got paid $6,500. And that's equal to about 50 grand in today's valuation. So it was absolutely pitiful that they allowed themselves to be bought out at all. And I mean, for such a pittance, I mean, it's literally nothing in the grand scheme of things. But that's what the health of the world was worth to them. That's what their souls were worth. And it's pretty sad.
Yeah.
All the new studies, all the big studies now that have come out with hundreds of thousands of patients, even tens of thousands of people in randomized controlled trials looking at saturated fat and replacing it with polyunsaturated fat, actually shows that there's no correlation between cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, and saturated fat and heart disease. And in fact, the Journal of the American College of Cardiology just published a position paper and literature review in 2020 discussing this and saying that there's actually no upper limit in the amount of saturated fat that is safe to eat. It is not associated with heart disease. There is no correlation even between saturated fat and heart disease. And that, in fact, there's an inverse correlation. So the more saturated fat you eat, the less likely you are to have a stroke. The less saturated fat you eat, the more likely you are to have a stroke. And so this is something that's very, very important. And there have been other studies and meta-analyses looking at LDL so and they find there's no correlation there either. So it's something that we really, really, really need to rethink and get these guidelines changed. And in fact, the USDA and things like that, as far back as 2015, was talking about getting rid of their recommendations for limiting cholesterol, because there's just like the evidence was just not there. As far as how I'm feeling, my health benefits since restarting this, as I said, in my early 20s, I've never felt better. I was more athletic and had more energy than ever at any point in my life. Now I'm again at the same level. I have just an absolute ton of energy, a lot of mental clarity. I can handle not getting a lot of sleep, which is very good being on call all the time in my specialty and working 7 days a week generally. And I've had a lot of health benefits in just my skin, my energy levels, brain fog, just working out. I've shredded fat off my body and very easy to put on muscle. So I can maintain a very athletic physique, even though I don't really have much time to work out. I haven't really actually, been to the gym or worked out really in the last few months, but I still remain at a low body fat percentage and I still maintain my musculature, which is a normal state for any animal. If you look at animals in the zoo that are living a completely sedentary lifestyle, they are very lean and muscular. I've never seen a fat giraffe or a fat zebra or a fat lion in the zoo. And that's because they're being fed what they're supposed to be fed. And you'll actually see some menageries or zoos, if they feed them, grain and kibble and things like that, because it's cheaper, they get fat, they get overweight, and they get many diseases that we would normally see in human populations, call them human diseases. And that's exactly what why we're seeing them in those animals as well as ourselves, because I think it's a direct cause and effect from eating the wrong thing.
So, is there a thing such as good cholesterol and bad cholesterol? Is that?
There is, but in a very nuanced way, because HDL is considered the good cholesterol, but LDL is also good cholesterol. LDL is very important. So in the studies with hundreds of thousands of people, we look at people over the age of 65, the ones that have higher LDL cholesterol live longer and stay independent longer. So, and they have less risk of Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, stroke, and all the rest. So it's actually very beneficial. LDL, we make LDL, and we make it for a very good reason. It's a very important molecule in our body. The problem is inflammation and damage to the body brought about by, again, usually introducing things to your body. So like smoking, drinking alcohol, any sort of drugs or harmful chemicals, but also carbohydrates and sugar and seed oils and other things that cause oxidative stress. When you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, your blood sugar goes up. This is actually quite dangerous. These glucose molecules will physically fuse to other molecules through a non-enzymatic process, meaning that we're not driving the process. It's just an automatic process that happens. And it's called glycation. When different molecules get glycated, they can become permanently damaged or can damage certain markers on them that are then used. So in the case of, hemoglobin in your blood, we look at HbA1c. This is a marker in diabetics on how good their blood control is. So that's that glycated product of hemoglobin. So that is just a marker of overall inflammation and disease. So higher blood sugar causes direct damage. This is what kills diabetics. So this is dangerous, and your body reacts and responds by increasing your insulin. Insulin can disrupt and disable many processes in your metabolism and even in your hormonal health. In women, it can actually precipitate PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, by blocking the conversion of testosterone into estrogen in the ovaries. And this is a leading cause of infertility in women. In both men and women, it can cause high blood pressure by making the arteries not as compliant and being able to expand and contract appropriately, and so the blood pressure goes up. So
A lot of fitness enthusiasts say women need carbs for their menstrual cycle. What do you think about this?
yeah, I don't know where that comes from, I mean, and the thing is that you make carbs. There's a process called gluconeogenesis. When you are not eating carbohydrates, your body makes carbohydrates. So when you eat carbohydrates, it really disrupts and disables your metabolism, and it causes harm, as I just mentioned. So getting away from that is very beneficial. You will make all the blood sugar you need. You will make all the glycogen you need, and you'll also have the added benefit of making all the ketones you need, which is actually your brain's preferred energy source and your heart's preferred energy source. And it's something that people miss because they say that, well, you need carbs in order to do certain processes, not realizing that we make all the carbs that you need. You don't need to eat carbs. That's the difference. Yes, you may need carbohydrates, you may need glucose for certain processes, but you never need to eat any glucose in order to provide that energy because it's not an essential nutrient. This is something that's recognized by many international medical boards and bodies, that the amount of carbohydrates that you need throughout your lifetime for health is zero. You don't need any carbohydrates. And I mean, think about all the examples of human civilizations that have only eaten meat, like the Inuit, or like the different African tribes, or the Nenет and the Siberian tribes, and the Mongol Empire. I mean, these people were all carnivores. They just ate meat. Even the Mongols, I mean, they were completely lactose intolerant, so the only dairy products they could eat were fermented, so they still didn't have any carbohydrates. So you have entire civilizations in in our history, and sometimes very recent history or current day, that don't eat any carbohydrates throughout their entire life, generation after generation, and they are surviving in extreme conditions, like in the Arctic Circle, and they're doing great. They're not just barely eking out a survival. They're thriving. You either thrive in that situation or you die. There's really no alternative. And our ancestors that came through the ice ages as well. I mean, what carbohydrate source was there available then? What sort of grains were they growing across the land bridge between Asia and Alaska when those people migrated over to the Americas? So, and you have to think of it as well from a natural point of view. If a lion during estrus just needed more carbohydrates, something in them would have to tell them, I need to eat some tuber or something like that. It would have to be a natural instinct, or else it wouldn't have any sort of evolved pressures, right? Because in the wild, you don't have a health coach telling you what you need to do at certain times of the month, and when you're getting your menses, and 3 weeks before you need to do this, and 2 weeks before you need to do that. Where was that in the wild? Where was that 500,000 years ago? If it wasn't able to happen naturally, then it probably isn't natural, right? So, koalas don't have calendars and calculators to figure out when they're supposed to eat certain things and get their macros and all these sorts of things. They just eat, and they eat their natural diet, and they get a natural response. And so that's what we need to do as well. I mean, there's no animal that I know of in anywhere in nature that eats a different diet throughout different cycles in their life, or of the year anyway. Like baby mammals will eat milk, right? But then when they're weaned onto whatever the adult is eating, and then they eat what the adult eats for the rest of their life, male or female, estrus or no estrus. So we forget that humans are animals as well. We're more intelligent animals, and we have more technology, but we are still animals, and we still have to understand that those same laws and rules apply to us, and the same sort of natural processes must have happened necessarily for us to exist at all. And so, we sort of step away from that at our own risk, because they do cause health concerns and health problems.
So when I was 14, I had delayed puberty. How does Does the carnivore help development?
Yeah, I think so. I think in a lot of ways it does because you're providing your body exactly what it needs. So you're going to develop to your genetic potential. None of us have really developed to our genetic potential, unfortunately. You can look at the fossil record prior to the agricultural revolution. We were much taller on average. Males, adult male size, depending on the area, was around 6'2" or even 6'4". The adult male average height now is in America is 5'8", and so that's a big contrast. Our brains were also larger, 10 to 11% larger now or then than they are now. So we actually, our brains have gotten smaller. We've gotten dumber because I think that we're not developing properly. We're not giving our bodies and brains a chance to develop to their genetic potential. Our jaws are smaller, and our teeth are more crooked. Our wisdom teeth aren't coming in, and this is all nutritional. This is not genetic. The House record is very clear on this, and even in dentistry journals, they're talking about this is not genetic. This is purely nutritional. You're not getting enough adequate nutrition, and most of these things that you need for this proper jaw and teeth to develop properly are all fat soluble vitamins that we miss because everyone's just avoiding fat, and avoiding meat in general. And some of these things only come from meat. You don't get them from plants at all. And so, like vitamin K2 is a major one, but also K1 and calcium and vitamin D3. So all of these things are very important, and actually chewing on the right consistency food, not sucking your thumb, breathing through your nose. All these things play a role, but nutrition is a major factor. And that's something that we've lost. You can actually tell if a fossil came before or after the agricultural revolution, or before that area was introduced to agriculture, because the teeth are so different and the jaws are so different and the brains are small. And so you'll get a lot of crooked teeth, a bunch of cavities, and smaller jaws. So all of that stuff plays a role. And hormonally, I sort of alluded to, ways that this can affect your hormones, but it is actually a very major issue. It can seriously disrupt your hormones when you stop eating meat. First of all your hormones, especially your sex steroid hormones like testosterone, estrogen, progestogens, all your mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, things like cortisol, all of these things are derived from cholesterol. Vitamin D is derived from cholesterol. So you actually need enough cholesterol before you can actually make these things. That's the substrate necessary to make all your hormones and a lot of other things in your body. Every cell in your body is made out of cholesterol. I remember learning that in 8th grade biology and thinking, like, how can cholesterol be bad for us? We are cholesterol. And so it is a bit silly. So our hormones specifically, again, are made out of cholesterol. We're avoiding cholesterol and fat like the plague. We make cholesterol, but we don't make enough. We make about 70% of our actual requirements. So you need to get some from your diet. So that's one thing. Then having high insulin, again, will disrupt your body's ability to rationalize and balance your hormones, which is very important. It's not just enough to have enough of one or the other. They have to be in the right balance with each other. And like I said, with women, women make testosterone first. So they're all derived from cholesterol, but women would make testosterone first, and then that testosterone is converted into estrogen in the ovaries, and then higher insulin will block that. Right. So that will seriously disrupt the development of a young woman, and then later in life can cause a lot of problems like PCOS, early menopause, difficulties in fertility as well. Like the fertility rates in America have dropped by over 50% in the last 40, 50 years. And so that's not just reproduction rates, that's actual fertility rates of people trying to get pregnant and they're not having success. And so that's indicative of hormonal issues and health issues in general. The other thing to think about and to remember is that the different ways that plants defend themselves can play a role in your hormones. Some of these things are called hormone disruptors. They can actually even mimic hormones like estrogen. So people talk about how there's, sorry?
Like soya is high in estrogen. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So people try to vilify meat by saying, well, we're giving all these hormones to cows, and so their estrogen level is double what it would be normally. And that's technically correct, but it's not put in context. The context matters because a normal piece of beef, 3 ounces of lean steak, from a non-hormone treated cow will have about 2 nanograms of estrogen. And then from a hormone treated cow, it'll have 3.9 nanograms of estrogen. So that is technically correct. There's about twice as much estrogen in that piece of beef. But the context is what is important, because 3 ounces of cabbage have 400 nanograms of estrogen, phytoestrogens that mimic estrogen in your body. Maybe it's not perfect 1-to-1, but it does mimic estrogen in your body. And so, what do you replace the beef with? Well, you're replacing it with other you might replace it with chicken, but a lot of people are saying, oh, there's all these hormones in meat, so don't eat meat at all. So you're replacing it with vegetables like cabbage, like soy, which can have over 1 million nanograms of phytoestrogens. The birth control pill has 35,000 nanograms of estrogen, depending on the pill. And a fertile woman of childbearing age will make upwards of 150,000 nanograms of estrogen a day. Okay, so the difference between 1.9 nanograms of estrogen in hormone treated beef and non-hormone treated beef is really negligible. And when you're also considering that, what are you replacing it with? You're replacing it with plants that have far more estrogenic effects, then the entire point is moot. And so that's the problem, that people tell one side of the story, but they don't tell the complete story, and they don't give the context. They just try to scare people away from doing what they don't want them to do, and they don't actually tell them what's actually happening, so they can make a rational and informed decision. So that's a major thing, is that and there's things that just disrupt hormones as well as just adding to the burden of estrogen. And so those can all disrupt your hormones in major ways, and severely affect development in both men and women.
Yeah, it explains why we're shorter than average as well, because doesn't I've done a bit of research, and estrogen fuses the bones together.
Yeah, and the thing is that men need estrogen too, and just like women need testosterone, but they really do need to be in the right balance, and with all your other hormones as well. And so when you sort of slip out of that balance, things are going to change, and your body works, gets these signals and impulses in certain gradients. You get a certain amount of this and a certain amount of this. It sends a specific signal to develop or grow in a certain way. And so, however we were supposed to develop, we haven't developed that way. So, we're not as tall as we would be. Our bones aren't as dense. Our muscles aren't as dense. Our brains aren't as big. Our teeth and jaws aren't as developed and healthy as they would have been. Now, we are what we are, and hopefully we're all happy with that, and we can still optimize our health going forward by eating optimally. But what we can certainly do is try to optimize the development of our kids, and the further generations, and that's something that we can do, and as well as optimizing our health and the health of people that are growing older, because it's even more important as you grow older to have to really eat optimally, because you don't have the the give that you would have had as a teenager or someone in your early 20s, where you can sort of get away with eating worse things, and because eventually your body just isn't able to cope with the amount of damage and pressure that you're putting on it. So it's more and more and more important as we get older, what we eat, and it's really the most important, what we feed our kids and further generations, because there's only one chance to develop, and you'll never get that back.
So humans aren't really the same as our ancestors who were carnivore.
We haven't developed the same. I mean, genetically, we're the same. Genetically, we haven't really changed much in the last 300,000 years. And so that's the thing. We have a lot of modern technology and modern foods that did not exist even 10,000 years ago, let alone 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, 500,000 years ago, when our ancestors were eating what they were eating to develop and evolve into what we are today. So that's what you should be looking at. If something didn't exist 500,000 years ago, or even 50,000 years ago, you really shouldn't eat it, because it definitely wasn't something that we were designed to eat biologically. And a lot of the food that we eat now is so highly processed, and to me, these seed oils were, first
it's so
developed.
well in
Yeah.
supermarkets, all this processed and high sugar. It's a lot cheaper than the stuff born to eat. So I think it's
Yeah.
just easy for us to pick up?
But yeah, it's very cheap.
Mm.
And the thing is that there's a very high markup. And so they make a very high profit margin. The sugar companies make about $1.3 trillion a year. And so that's a massive, massive, stake that they have in this. And so they put out a lot of industry research, and they don't always say that this is actually being funded by the sugar companies, which is illegal. You're not allowed to do that. But we have clear documentation that they have done that. Coca-Cola spends 11 times more in nutritional research than the NIH. Okay, so the nutritional research that's going out is all industry research, and the only thing you can say for certain about industry research is that it always favors whoever's paying for it. And so Coca-Cola is putting out a bunch of studies saying that, oh, sugar's all not that bad. Well, gee, I wonder why. And and I'm so surprised that they're finding that, because they're designing the studies to give that outcome. So this isn't real science. This is just propaganda.
How long does it take your body to adjust to carnivore?
Pretty quick, so in about 24 hours after you stop eating carbohydrates and sugar, your biochemistry will switch over into a more normal metabolic state. In biochemistry, we call this a fasting state. I think that's misnamed. I think that in fact that's our primary metabolic state. That's the primary metabolic state of most animals in the wild, and including human animals who are eating just meat all the time.
During the transition, do you go under any negative side effects or?
Not from eating meat. You won't get any side effects from eating meat. Some people that haven't eaten meat in years and years and years, it might take a few days for their pancreas to start making more enzymes like protease and lipase to break this stuff down. But I mean, it's days, and then it'll be back up to snuff. And the main side effects people will feel would negative side effects anyway would be from withdrawals. So you can withdraw from sugar. Sugar is actually a drug. It gives a dopamine hit to your addiction centers of your brain, just like cocaine, heroin, and meth. And so just like cocaine, heroin, and meth, you are going to have a bit of a withdrawal when you remove that dopamine source. And so you'll withdraw and you'll feel a bit fluish and you'll feel a bit junky. You may get headaches, but not everyone does. Some people do. And some people will call that like a keto flu or something like that. I think that's mostly to do with the sugar withdrawals, carb withdrawals, other sorts of chemicals that you're withdrawing from, and that goes away. Also, people that just do keto, they'll eat a lot more vegetables because they're thinking, well, that's where I get all my nutrients from. I'll get my energy from fat and protein, but then I need to get all my micronutrients and things like that from plants. But really, you don't need that. You get absolutely everything you need from meat. And these plants have these defense chemicals, which can actually make you feel a bit gross. And so you're eating 6 times the amount of vegetables you ever ate before. You're getting 6 times the amount of defense chemicals. And that builds up in your system and you don't feel great. So I think that as well will contribute to those sort of negative feelings. But if you're just doing carnivore, the only negative feelings you're going to get will be the withdrawals. And so if you're withdrawing, if you're not taking coffee, again, coffee is a plant, so this has a lot of defense chemicals as well. Caffeine is a defense chemical that was developed as an insecticide and a neurotoxin hundreds of thousands, millions of years ago. Millions of years ago. And so that was designed to stop insects from eating it, right? And we are much bigger and we're a lot different than insects in a number of ways. So we actually sort of like the feeling of getting caffeine in our system sometimes, but it is a neurotoxin. It is designed as an insecticide. And so I find that I feel much better without it, and certainly much better without coffee. But it is a drug and it is addictive and it has a withdrawal, and you can get headaches and you can feel a bit junky, but that all goes away. That all will subside. The main thing is making sure you're eating enough meat and eating enough fat. Most people will not eat enough fat just because we've been so averse to eating fat our whole lives, or at least for the last 40, 50 years, that it's very difficult to eat a lot more fat. So maybe we'll eat like twice as much, 3 times as much fat as we ever ate before. And well, that has to be enough. And people get quite worried about that. But in fact, we need a lot more than that. So we need the majority of our calories to come from fat.
How much meat can you eat? Like, is there a limit or?
Well, it's really just based on the individual. So, obviously, your stomach size and your hunger levels. So I think that it's something that when you're eating naturally, when you're eating what you're designed to eat, what you're set up to eat, you will be able to listen to your natural signals. So animals in the wild, they don't have a health coach telling them when to stop eating, how much to get. They don't have a calculator to figure out all their macros and how much to eat on a daily basis. They just eat. They eat when they're hungry, they eat when it tastes good, and they stop when it doesn't. And so we can do that as well. And our hunger signals will be very different. When you eat carbohydrates, it actually deranges your hunger signals and it makes you feel like you're starving all the time. And this is why one of the reasons why people would overeat when eating outside of our natural diet. So when you're just eating meat, you have to really have much more subtle hunger signals. You have to relearn your hunger signals. One of the best ways of doing that is taste. So if I tell people that if meat doesn't taste good, you're not hungry. But if it does taste good, you are, and you should listen to that. So if you're eating meat at first and you're hungry, at first it'll taste amazing. It'll just taste fantastic, and you'll just want to eat more. You'll want to eat more, and you'll get to a point where actually because that positive feedback is telling you, hey, we want these nutrients. Now, sugar is an outlier. Obviously, sugar gives you a positive feedback as well because it's a drug, but it's a drug, and so that's cocaine will give you positive feedback as well. So we just need to be smarter than the substance. So but when you're eating what you're supposed to eat, you do get a positive feedback as well. And that positive feedback will get less and less as you go, unlike sugar, unlike cocaine, right? Um, so as you go, it tastes less and less good. And you'll get to a point where now it doesn't really taste very good at all, or it doesn't really taste interesting. And if you keep eating, keep forcing yourself, it'll actually start tasting bad. And you'll start thinking, I don't want to eat this. But some people that have, portion issues, they'll think, well, this is how much is on my plate. I have to finish my plate. And they force themselves. And they're like, it takes me 2 hours to finish a meal. And what I argue is that no, the meal was done 2 hours ago. It's just you didn't stop eating. And so, that is something you should listen to. When meat tastes good, then eat it. And when it stops tasting good, stop. And I try to have leftovers. I always plan to make more than I think I'm going to want because I want to get to that point where I'm like, I'm not really enjoying this. I'm not really interested in this anymore. And then I know I've saturated my body's, desire for those nutrients. There's really no upper limit on how much to eat. It's really just going by your own instincts, your own feelings, and your own hunger and how you're feeling. If you're taking medications like corticosteroids, like prednisone, those will artificially raise your hunger levels. And so maybe you have to make some adjustment there. But just for normal people, not in that situation or in a similar situation, you can just listen to your hunger signals. You can listen to taste. A lot of people come to a carnivore because they're trying to lose weight. And so maybe some of these people will have had a gastric bypass or sleep, and their stomachs will be physically smaller and they won't be able to handle the capacity. So they need to make some adjustments too. Don't drink water within 2 hours of eating because you want all that space available for meat. And then, eat as much as you can without hurting yourself. And then probably have to eat a few times a day in order to get as much as your body needs. Or maybe someone doesn't have a gallbladder and think, well, maybe I can't eat that. Well, you can eat that. You just have to, you may have to space out your fatty meals throughout the day so you can absorb it because bile is still made from your liver, it just drips into your intestine. And that's what emulsifies fat and allows you to absorb it. So that's, when you have a gallbladder, you can squish out a whole bunch of concentrated bile and you can eat a big fatty meal at one time. You can absorb it all. But if you're not doing that, if you don't have that ability, then you have to sort of space out your meals. So different things like that you can consider. But for most people, you just eat when you're hungry and stop when it stops tasting good.
Yeah. So is caffeine, coffee, tea a no on the carnivore?
Well, I mean, nothing's a hard no if people just want to do it. I mean, I think that my rule for myself and what I try to impress upon people is that plants have these defense chemicals, and they aren't great for you. And so some are better than others, some are worse than others, but none of them are optimal. And so if you really want to optimize your health, then you should really just focus on just meat, just water, and even just maybe some salt to taste, and that's it. So my hard rule for myself and for people who are really trying to be optimal is no plants, no sugar, no sweeteners, nothing artificial. And that goes for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. So coffee being a plant, I say no to that. any sort of sweeteners at all, I say no to that. And caffeine being one of these defense chemicals derived from plants, I say no to that, and I feel much better for that. And so, people like coffee. It's not just carnivores that drink coffee. Everyone drinks coffee, and but a lot of carnivores are quitting coffee because of that principle that it's a defense chemical. Caffeine is a defense chemical, and there are a lot of other. I mean, there's 150,000 other chemicals in coffee as well. Many of those are defense chemicals, and so you can increase your inflammation. You can increase other sorts of derangements in your body and your physiology. And so, people that are trying to get optimal health, they do try to avoid that. So people can do what they want, of course, but for me, I don't have any of that stuff.
What's the difference between keto and carnivore?
Ketogenic diet has been very successful, and even in clinical medical practice, we've been using it for over 100 years to treat epilepsy, to treat diabetes, and to treat a number of other things. And this is part of that metabolic medicine, metabolic health that is just growing concern. We're now using it to cure schizophrenia and major depression, anxiety, OCD, bipolar disorders, because these are all being shown to be metabolic issues at the level of the mitochondria. And when you go into ketosis for months and months and months, your mitochondria are much more healthy. And so keto is really just the absence of carbohydrates and sugar and alcohol, anything that will exogenously raise your blood sugar. So it just lets your body make all the blood sugar, glycogen that you need. And because you have higher ketones, we call this a ketogenic state, and your liver is making blood sugar, it's making glycogen, and you're not providing it. Once you provide it, your insulin goes up, it shuts all that down because insulin forces energy into cells, doesn't allow it to come out of cells. So it blocks proteolysis, it blocks lipolysis. And so as soon as you eat carbohydrates, your fat cells are shut off. You cannot access them for energy, right? So you have to keep eating carbs to keep your blood sugar up, or you start feeling rotten. Whereas in a ketogenic state, you're always providing your own energy. You're always mobilizing your own energy from your fat stores, which is what you're supposed to do. That's your gas tank, right? So a carnivore diet is a ketogenic diet when done right. Some people will eat, fruit and honey and think that that's carnivore, but I don't really think it is. I mean, these are all, sugar and plants and things like that. So lions don't eat honey. They don't eat sugar. I mean, bears will eat honey. Bears are trying to give themselves, diabetes and things like that because they're trying to put on a lot of fat for the winter. Lions don't, and most carnivores don't, and unless they're starving or something like that. Certainly not eating fruit anyway. And so a ketogenic diet is really just the absence of carbohydrates, but you can even do that in a vegetarian diet. But generally, you're going to have to replace those calories that you get from carbohydrates with meat and fat. And then, in fact, that's sort of the opposite of what we did before. We were all eating meat and fat, and they're saying, okay, well, you have to get rid of the fat because that's bad for you. So replace it with carbs, replace it with sugar. And that was actually what was recommended by people like Ansel Keys and the other scientists that were, bought off by the sugar companies. They said, oh, well, you don't want to eat fat. So just replace the calories with sugar. It's just an empty calorie. It gives you the energy you need. So this was very fiendish, honestly. So carnivore, they both should get rid of. Both should be a ketogenic diet. They both should be putting you in a state of ketosis predominantly. But carnivore diet goes a step further. People in keto understand that carbohydrates cause problem. They derange your metabolism, and they cause disruptions in your hormones and all sorts of different processes in your body, which causes a lot of diseases. And so a lot of doctors are really understanding now that a ketogenic diet is very important for optimal health. Carnivore goes one step further because we recognize that there are more harmful chemicals than, besides sugar and carbs in the food that we eat. And so you're wanting to avoid all of those altogether and be optimal. So we are cutting out all the plants in general and carbohydrates in particular. So a carnivore diet is a subset of a ketogenic diet, but I think that it's a more appropriate one for our species. I think it is our appropriate species-specific diet, and a carnivore ketogenic diet gets you closer to there because it takes a major factor out of ill health, which is exogenous carbohydrates. So it puts you strongly in the right direction. And when I'm talking to people about things to cut out of their diet, that the number one thing I tell them is get rid of alcohol, carbs, and sugar, and you're well on your way and then just increase the amount of meat that you're eating, or eggs if you really don't want to eat meat. Then, but then as you go, you can eliminate more and more and more to get better and better health. And that's what the idea of a carnivore diet is.
Yeah. So same benefits for keto, carnivore, same.
Well, I think probably even more benefits from carnivore diet because you're eliminating out all the other sort of toxins and neurotoxins as well. So people that don't know, like there's 100 years of clinical evidence showing that ketogenic diet is extremely helpful for suppressing seizures. And in fact, for hundreds of years, the only treatment we had for seizures was fasting. You just stop eating, and then people figured out that, hey, if you just don't eat carbs, it does the same thing. And so you're just eating sort of meat and fat. And in fact, they really need high fat. So you really want your ketones up. You're eating a lot of fat and a lot of fatty meat, and that's very beneficial. And you can have some other greens and things like that, but really getting away from the carbs and sugar is very, very important. And I've seen a lot of people get a lot of benefit from just going on a ketogenic diet. Some still have, some remainder seizures, but they're significantly improved. Then others would drink coffee. One guy told me that he went keto and did really, really well. Then he went carnivore, did even better with his epilepsy. He was on multiple medications that he was now able to come off of, and he hadn't had seizures. Then he had a cup of coffee, and that gave him a seizure. And so and caffeine is a neurotoxin, and so that's what it was designed to do. And so in people that are susceptible to that, it can act as a trigger for seizures and epilepsy. And we actually know about, there's a lot of different things. Oh, this can trigger epilepsy. This can trigger seizures. This can trigger this and that. What does that mean? That means that it's messing with your brain and the energy functions thereof. And you should probably just avoid it in general, whether you have epilepsy or not. So I think that, I don't have any, I don't think there's been any studies yet on this looking at a difference between a carnivore diet and a ketogenic diet. It'd be great to see if there were, but I think just in principle, you're going to eliminate more things that can disrupt your brain's metabolism and health, and I think that would provide even more benefit to people that maybe are still having some residual seizures even on a ketogenic diet. It may not cure everyone of everything, but I think it will help everyone.
Yeah, I also have psychosis as well, and I've been struggling because I have to have my medication, my antipsychotics, with at least 350 calories, and I'm struggling to get that amount of calories from meat. Yeah.
Well, butter, fat is the most calorie dense food there is, right? So it's nine calories per gram, 9 kilocalories per gram. Whereas carbs and protein are just 4, right? And so, if you have, you can have fatty meat, which would provide more calories, and you can add just butter to that if it's not quite enough. So, there are people like, Bella, steak and butter. Yeah, she just eats butter, she just has a stick of butter and is just eating that. And it tastes good, when you get over that hump of thinking like, oh my God, butter, it's so bad for me. It actually tastes delicious. I've caught myself eating just pieces of butter straight as well. It really tastes good, especially when you're hungry, especially when your body wants those nutrients. You get that positive feedback saying, this is good, eat this. This is something that Dr. Georgia Ede and Professor Chris Palmer from Harvard have actually shown. There's a number of published peer-reviewed studies and articles by both of them in psychiatry showing that just putting people on a ketogenic diet long term significantly helps psychoses and all other mental disorders. So it's a significant benefit. Professor Palmer just wrote a book called Brain Energy, which is very, very interesting. It's just a masterclass on how the mitochondria and metabolism work, and when it goes wrong, what can happen. And he shows that when it goes wrong, in the genetically susceptible, you can develop schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar, OCD, major depression, anxiety, all the rest. And that people are finding in clinical trials that going on a ketogenic diet helps where medications haven't. And so it's something that, I'm really glad that you're you're looking into this for yourself, because I think it will significantly help you. And I think it goes hand in hand. If you need to take 350 calories from meat, or just from in general with your medications, you actually do that much more easily on a carnivore diet, because fatty meat has a lot of calories, which is good. It also has a lot of nutrients. That's what people don't realize, is that fat is not just a calorie source. It's a nutrition source. It has all these very essential nutrients. The fat itself is an essential nutrient. The cholesterol is an essential nutrient. And there's all these fat soluble vitamins that are all essential nutrients. And so that's a very, very, very nutrient dense, it's actually the most nutrient dense food that we have is meat, fatty meat. And you get everything you need in the proportion that you need it. And so, I'm really glad that you found that.
Does it help PTSD as well, like stress hormones and healing your brain from trauma? I've been also doing TMS therapy as well, so it'd be interesting if there's a link.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems to, I mean, the thing is with PTSD is obviously, it comes from actual trauma and things that have happened to you in your life, but it does seem that the brain chemistry side of things can be significantly helped in PTSD, and that's something that Professor Palmer gets into in his book as well. And so, I think that's definitely one of those ones that probably will need a combination of care and counseling and as well as the dietary changes. But the dietary changes absolutely can help, because they help your brain chemistry, they help your brain's metabolism, they increase the number of mitochondria, they increase the efficacy of your mitochondria. Your mitochondria don't just make energy, they run your cells. They move around physically and basically turn on and off different parts of your cell to make different things happen. And there's thousands of these things, sometimes hundreds of thousands of these things. And if there aren't enough of them, or they're moving slower and not as able to do their job properly, the expression, a day late and a dollar short. Well, that's happening in your neurons. And you have anywhere from 400 billion to 3 trillion neurons. And you're having thousands of these things go wrong. Multiply that by a trillion, you're having problems. And so, when you address that with a ketogenic diet, really a carnivore diet, I think would be the best, just because that's our biological heritage. That's what we are designed to eat. That you're going to increase the number of mitochondria you have, usually by a factor of 4, and you'll increase the efficacy of your mitochondria, again, usually by a factor of 4, because you replace the old and sort of non-functioning mitochondria when you're in ketosis long term, and you increase the you actually multiply the amount of mitochondria you make. You'll make more mitochondria when you're on a ketogenic diet for a number of months. And people know the term autophagy, where your body replaces cells that aren't really functioning as well, or maybe replace all the little organelles and the different parts, just like getting a tune-up in your car and replacing different things so it runs better. That's what autophagy is. And that happens with your mitochondria as well, called mitophagy. So you're replacing the dysfunctional mitochondria in your cells, and you're making more of them. And so your body and your brain just work better. And so, yes, that applies to PTSD as well.
Would it be a problem for diabetics or people with low blood sugar?
No, it's actually probably the best for them as well, because you can. It's been shown in clinical trials that you can actually reverse type 2 diabetes with a ketogenic diet. And obviously, carnivore diet being a subset of ketogenic diet, I think a better example of a ketogenic diet, that's going to work as well. And so the people that have been on insulin for over a decade, some of them are coming off of their insulin in a matter of months, and coming off all their oral medications in the same time. My mom is an example of one of these people that she was diabetic for 22 years, type 2 diabetic for 22 years. And within 2 months, she came off all of her oral medications and reduced down to the minimum dose of her insulin. She was actually on quite a high dose of insulin at that point, and a high dose of all her oral medications. And in 2 months, she came off all her oral medications and reduced down to the minimum dose of her insulin, because her blood sugar was so under control. And her HbA1c went from 9, which is very, very high, down to 6, which is the upper limit of normal in a non-diabetic. And her doctor just looked at that and said, "How the hell did you do this? What the hell did you do? I mean, this doesn't happen. Diabetes is a progressive disease. It only gets worse. We can mitigate it and slow it down with diet, lifestyle, and medications, but it only gets worse. It does not just go away. What the hell did you do? And so, she told her about the work that I was doing, the research I was doing, and the conclusions I came to, and she was quite interested. And so I went in and had a long talk with her and discussed all the different findings that I and conclusions that I had made. And she was sold, and she was like, right, okay, we're going to start doing this very differently. So diabetes, and in fact, we have this in the medical literature. This is something that's been so papered over since that 1977 declaration saying that meat was bad, fat was bad. So everyone just stopped eating meat and fat, and we forgot about 150 years of medical literature and scientific discovery had been used up until that point with very good effect. So we've been using a ketogenic diet for 100 years to treat diabetics and keep their blood sugar very even. Even type 1 diabetics, when insulin wasn't available, it kept their blood sugar low. And actually, in some cases, in animal models, has been shown you can actually regrow your beta islet cells and start making insulin again. It hasn't been shown in humans to be able to do that. However, we've done that in animal models, but it's kept them alive a lot longer when we don't have insulin available, even in type 1 diabetics. So, when you're not bringing in a whole bunch of extra carbs, well, you don't need as much insulin to deal with it, right? Because you're just making just the amount of carbs that you need, and then even a smaller amount of insulin is effective, and you're not getting all you're reversing peripheral insulin resistance and things like that. So it's very, very, very good for diabetics. Yes.
Is dairy high in sugar, or can you have dairy on the carnivore?
Yeah, so dairy is probably a bit of a gray area in a carnivore diet. The milk will definitely have a lot of carbohydrates, and will certainly have enough lactose in it to raise your blood sugar. And even like lactose-free milk, it doesn't mean there's no sugar. It just means that they've split the lactose into glucose and galactose, which are the constituent parts of lactose. So there's still a lot of carbs, and it can raise your insulin enough to cause a disruption in your metabolism. But things like cheese or fermented dairy products, like yogurt or kefir, those wouldn't have really any carbohydrates in them, and so those would be okay from that standpoint. Dairy's okay. It does have a lot of good things that are good nutrients, good fats. The lactobacillus bacteria as well in yogurt is quite good for you and your microbiome. But you don't need it. It's not necessary. Meat is the meal. Meat has all the nutrients. Dairy has good things in it, but it doesn't have everything. Like, you can't just live on dairy. And so, it's something that can be used as a condiment, and if you want to, but I think people should use it sparingly, because it's not as good as meat. And so if you're looking for optimal, you're looking to optimize your health, and obviously you want to eat just what is best for you all the time. Having a bit of dairy every now and then is okay. Some people have a problem with it. There's some dairy proteins, casein, like A1 casein, that is more inflammatory than other things. So that's why people talk about A2 milk is a bit more easily tolerated by people. But even A2 milk can be pro-inflammatory as well. And so just something to think about. Some people that have like autoimmune issues are going to be much more sensitive to anything that's going to increase their inflammation. Even some meats, nothing's going to be as bad as different plants that have much more inflammatory effects. But dairy can certainly cause a problem for them. So if people want to eat dairy and they feel okay with it, then that's fine. I would just use it sparingly and as a condiment only, and really just focus on meat. Meat being the meal at every instance.
What's your view on calorie counting? Do you have to calorie count on the carnivore?
No, I don't think you do. I think your body will take care of that. And, just like animals in the wild don't have to count calories, they just eat what their body's telling them to do. I think we can do that as well. Again, as long as you're not, taking any sort of like corticosteroids like prednisone as well, then you can actually listen to your hunger signals. So it's not necessary for any state, but like when people are talking about, weight loss, we're so used to starving ourselves to lose weight. It's really not necessary. You can actually eat what you're supposed to eat, and your body will actually naturally limit your calories. And it will just, because your body will prioritize using your excess body fat when your metabolism starts going up. So if you eat enough, your metabolism will actually rise, because your body says, okay, we have an abundance of food. We don't need to sequester things. When you're starving yourself and you're just not eating, or eating the wrong things that have a lot of, less calories, your body gets into a state where it says, okay, we're in a famine and we're starving. And so we need to sequester and secure as much fat as we can, or else we're not going to survive. That's a survival mechanism. And it's allowed us to survive, in different times that we haven't been able to eat for weeks or longer. And that's a good thing. That helps us survive. But it ends up being a problem when you're trying to lose weight and you're starving yourself. And yeah, you can do the Auschwitz diet and just starve yourself to nothing, but that doesn't mean you're doing it in a healthy way. That doesn't mean that you're doing it in an optimal way, and your metabolism is getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So when you eat enough and your body's getting as much as it wants, it says, okay, well, we're not in a famine. We don't have to, secure all this fat and really save it, or else we'll die. So it starts raising your metabolism, and your metabolism starts going up, and you start using more energy. You start having more energy, start feeling better, and you also start losing more weight because your body will start releasing the fat that you have stored up because it's okay. We don't need this. So in fact, sometimes it can be a bit paradoxical where the more you eat, the more fat you burn. But it's a matter of what you're eating. You just need to eat the right things. And as long as you're just listening to your body and just giving your body what it wants, and it's not deranged by different sorts of medications, etc., then you can actually listen to it and you don't need to count calories, I don't think. And in fact, most people undereat on a carnivore diet and they start having problems. Oh, I'm not really feeling that great. Maybe my weight loss is stalling. You start looking, and then they start counting their calories and realize, like, wow, I'm only eating 800 calories a day, 1,000 calories a day. Like that can't be right, because you don't feel hungry in the same way. And so you have to relearn your hunger signals. And then they start eating. Okay, I'm just going to keep eating until meat stops tasting good. And then they find, wow, I'm eating 3 times as much. And then their weight starts dropping again. Also, as far as weight loss is concerned, of course, it's not weight loss that we're interested in, right? We're interested in fat loss, right? You don't want to lose bone density and muscle density, right? Both of those things will make you lose weight, but that's not healthy weight to lose, right? You want to lose excess fat, right? That's what we all want to do. We want to put on muscle. We want to increase our bone density. That's what we want. So when you're increasing your bone density and you're increasing your muscle mass and muscle density, your weight's going to go up, right? And so some people will find out like, oh, the scale's not changing, the scale's not changing. I need to be losing weight. Why the hell am I not losing weight? Well, you could be losing fat, but you're also gaining muscle and bone. And so that will offset it. Like, I mean, I lost when I just stopped eating greens. I was already not eating carbs and sugar 5 years ago. I just stopped eating greens and I increased the amount of meat I was eating, probably 5, 6 fold, and I started eating very fatty meat. So I probably quintupled my caloric intake. And I lost 23 pounds in 10 days, right? So I lost 10 kilos in 10 days. So like a kilo a day. And after that, I stabilized, and I was the same weight every single day for the next 3 months, but I was physically changing every day, and so I was shredding fat and stacking on muscle. And every few weeks I'd take a sort of a progress picture, and I was just amazed at how much difference, had been made in just those few short weeks. So even though
I've
I was exactly the same,
only been on the carnivore
transforming.
for a week and I've lost 2 inches on my waistline.
Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And so there you go. I mean, that's a much more uh beneficial, or more constructive marker is your waist size and your body habits. So I would imagine that you would have lost some weight as well. But the important thing is the composition of your body changing. And that will just continue. And the longer you do this, the more results you'll get and the better you'll feel. So that's great.
Do you need to exercise being on the carnivore?
You don't have to, but it helps. Exercise is really important, and it stimulates your body to thrive and develop and get better and be more healthy, and actually, age more slowly. And it does this in many, 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 many ways. But it's absolutely beneficial. But you don't have to do it. Like, I don't have time to exercise nearly as much as I would want to. I really love exercising. I come from a professional sports background. I've always loved sports since I was a kid, and I like working out. I really don't have time anymore with my work. I work 7 days a week, and when I come home from the hospital, I'm doing all my online stuff, and so it's very busy. But when you do work out, you'll get a lot more out of it. You'll be able to push yourself a lot harder. You'll have a lot more energy. You can go for longer. You'll recover much quicker, and the benefits you'll get are more. Like if you did the same amount of work, if you just went to like a HIIT class with everyone else, and you did the exact same amount of work, you would get more out of the work that you did on a carnivore diet because your body's working optimally, your hormones are working optimally, and you're not hindering yourself by taking in all these exogenous carbs and toxins and things like that. So your body's going to work better, your body's going to respond better, and you're going to get a lot more out of exercise. So exercise becomes a lot more interesting and fun. And you get a lot more benefits from it. People go to the gym and they just spin their wheels like, oh, I go to the gym all the time. I go for an hour a day, 4 days a week, and I'm not getting any better, and I'm not getting these results. And we'll say, okay, well, when you change your diet, that changes as well, and it also allows you to push yourself a lot harder, and that makes a huge difference. That effort level. Everyone can work out for an hour, but we can get very different workouts in that hour. And being on a carnivore diet can significantly improve the benefits from working out and from that hard work.
As insulin holds onto sodium, and as insulin reduces, we also reduce sodium on carnivore. So what would you say about someone's salt intake?
So there can be a bit of a lag period when you stop eating carbohydrates and your insulin levels go down. Sometimes you can lose some electrolytes at the level of the kidney, but that normalizes. We're not designed to have a lot of super high insulin levels all the time. Our bodies have adapted to it because our bodies are amazing, and so it's really when you stop eating all of that stuff and you start eating a carnivore diet, your body's working the way it's supposed to, but you're also geared up to work in an inappropriate way when you're eating a lot of carbs, your insulin's way higher. So your body has adjusted to that. And so there might be an adjustment period coming back, but your body will come back and adjust back to that. So, maybe sometimes people will have some electrolyte imbalances, especially in the first couple weeks when they're coming off of carbohydrates in general. But, you can just salt to taste. You can always salt to taste. When you're having a period, or if you're noticing that salt just tastes a lot better and everything's tasting bland, you want more salt. That's just your body saying, hey, we need a bit more sodium, and so you can just do that. And so even if you're losing,
salt tastes really sweet when you need it. I think it tastes.
Yeah, it just tastes just good. And so it's salting to taste is fine, and maybe your taste for salt will go up in the early weeks, and it might go down after that. I've naturally eaten much less salt as the longer I've gone on this, just less and less salt. So, but early on, maybe your body wants a bit more salt, and so you just salt to taste, and that should take care of that, and it'll normalize. Your body knows what it's doing.
Does the carnivore help water retention?
Yeah. So you can retain water for a number of different reasons. One of them being, glycogen. You put glycogen in your muscles, and that brings about 2 water molecules with each glycogen molecule, and so you can you get rid of all that excess glycogen. You'll still have glycogen, but you'll be replenishing it constantly, so you don't need this big massive store of glycogen because you need to store. You carbo load because you want to fill up on glycogen and then use all that because it's going to run out, right? But if you're on a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, you just constantly replenish your glycogen, so you don't need as much of it in storage, and water weight goes with that. Also, there's a lot of other inflammatory factors in plants. I wasn't eating any carbohydrates. I was just eating vegetables and meat, and I stopped eating vegetables, and it just 23 pounds just go away. I mean, I'm certain that some of that's going to be water weight. So you're gonna store different amounts of water depending on different plants that you're eating. You're gonna have inflammation that's going to cause you to retain water. So you get rid of all that on a carnivore diet, and all that excess water just washes out.
How does it affect developmental disorders and learning difficulties?
It depends on the developmental disorder and the learning disability. Not everything's caused directly by the food that we're eating or not eating. But I think anyone is going to benefit from eating this way and eating optimally. And if you're providing optimal nutrition, that's going to provide optimal nutrition for brain development as well. There are things like autism, which are looking more and more like nutritional deficiencies as opposed to just purely genetic. It would be in genetically susceptible populations. But this is actually something that Dr. Palmer and I discussed when I had him on my program. We were talking about how this can be this developmental issue is really related to diet as well, and can be improved by a ketogenic diet. Can significantly improve the symptoms of autism and development of autism as well, being on a ketogenic diet. So just removing the carbohydrates, but also you need to get enough meat as well and fat as well, because your brain requires these things to grow. Carnitine it's considered a non-essential amino acid. Carnitine, carnivore is the same root. It means it only comes from flesh, from animal flesh, right? So a carnivore is something that eats, bodies, right? And carnitine is a amino acid that only appears in animals and bodies. So we normally make carnitine, but not everyone does. Not everyone makes enough of it. And so there's a particular kind of autism that was discovered at University of Texas A&M, and they found that vegans and vegetarians were having much higher rates of autism, and they found that one of the reasons for that was a carnitine deficiency. Carnitine is integral to the development of neurons. So the proper formation and development of your brain cells come from carnitine, or at least carnitine plays a role, and they actually have a role in the mitochondrial health of your brain cells. And so this ties into all the work that Dr. Palmer did. So when you don't have enough carnitine, you're not going to make your brain cells properly. You're not going to have mitochondria that function properly, and your brain's not going to work properly, and you can develop this kind of autism. And so, vegetarians that aren't eating all that much meat, maybe they're eating some meat, but not others. But certainly, what's the first meat that they drop is red meat, right? Because they think that's the worst. In fact, it's the best. And it has a lot of carnitine, it has the most carnitine out of any animal source. And so maybe you drop red meat, maybe you're just having some like chicken breast or some fish every now and then, maybe some dairy. That may not be enough carnitine if you're really not making a lot of it or any at all. And then the vegans, they won't have any animal products whatsoever, and then they're not getting any carnitine at all. So even if they have a small deficiency, they'll have a problem, because you need to get enough carnitine in your diet, or else you can have problems. And even people that won't develop autism, you still benefit from getting more carnitine. Carnitine is very helpful in a lot of ways, and so we really miss out in our development if we lose out on things like carnitine, which is thought to be non-essential, but it actually is essential. You need a lot of it. You need more of it than we just make, and some people need a lot more than that. And so that's a specific example where eating something outside of our biologically appropriate diet can cause very serious, lifelong, lasting intellectual delays and learning disabilities.
Has there been any research about ADHD and carnitine?
I want to say yes. I think Dr. Palmer did actually go into that as well in his book, in ADHD, being helped by that. I'm not 100% sure, but I imagine, and I certainly have spoken to a lot of people anecdotally who had ADHD and have it significantly improved their situation.
Yeah, I do also. I don't know if you heard, because he's also in America. I do Dr. Patrick Nemechek's protocol. I'm not. It's not carnivore, but he's done all this research about gut health and brain information, and it's this protocol, and he's helped other autistics, adults and children, come off the spectrum.
Nice. Oh, that's really good. I haven't come across his work, but that's great.
Talking about brain size, I actually have cerebral atrophy, and what do you call? I haven't got water on my brain, but the verticals are enlarged.
Yeah. So not hydrocephalus, but ventriculomegaly sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is really good for brain health. I mean, I can't say that it's going to, reverse all that, but I can say confidently that it will optimize, the situation that you're in. It can't reverse everything, but it can definitely anyone wherever they're at.
Yeah. What's the current research about cancer, and what's the main conditions you've done your research in on the carnivore diet?
Well, pretty much everything, but yeah, I mean, cancer is a major one, and there's quite a lot of studies, even in human trials and animal models, looking at ketogenic diet and cancer, and it's very, very, very helpful in most, if not all, cancers. We don't have all of the big studies and big, large randomized controlled trials in all different kinds of cancers, but we have them in a lot of them. And then we have smaller trials and case series and case reports in others as well. And so in my field of neurosurgery, there are about 24 um, human trials for glioblastoma brain cancer, which is a very, very aggressive form of cancer. It's a 3 month survival after diagnosis on average with no treatment, or 15 to 18 months with treatment, so chemo radiation surgery. It's considered a terminal disease. It's not considered something that we can cure. And yet people that have gone on a ketogenic diet or even just a full carnivore diet have survived, 10 years plus. There are currently people alive that I've had on my show, like Andrew Scarborough, another gentleman named Pablo Kelly. They're both in the UK, who's lived nearly as long with this extremely aggressive cancer and have had like debulking surgery, but really have not undergone chemo radiation. They've just gone the dietary route, and they're living 10 times as long as the average, right? So, and there are more examples of this, and so about 24 studies looking at ketogenic metabolic therapy with glioblastoma brain cancer, and those and they all have shown benefit. They're smaller trials, so we need something larger. I'm trying to get a trial started at my institution with and get a lot of numbers, try to get hundreds of people involved, and then seeing what we see. But there are a number of studies that show major benefit in other cancers. So when I took cancer biology, I mean, this is something you learn and understand in cancer biology, that cancer cells require 400 times the amount of glucose, blood sugar, that normal cells do, because they all have damaged mitochondria. So cancer is really not a genetic issue per se. It's more of again, a mitochondrial metabolic issue, because not all cancers actually have any genetic changes. There are cancers that have no genetic changes in their nucleus, but they all have dysfunctional mitochondria. And the mitochondria actually have genes in them that code for a number of different things, and they're very important. They control they are the ones that can limit cell growth and cell division. They're the ones involved in apoptosis, saying, okay, things are going wrong here. We need to kill this cell. Well, if the mitochondria are damaged, that function goes off. That's a hallmark of cancer. And it's also, cancer is just unregulated cell growth. Well, that comes from the mitochondria. The mitochondria, when they're healthy and active, are able to decide when things are able to divide or not. When those are damaged, it can just divide uncontrollably. That's what cancer is. So when you address this from a metabolic point of view, and you go on a ketogenic diet, you limit the amount of blood sugar available. You're limiting the direct amount of energy available to those cells, and you're improving the health of mitochondria. You're replacing these things, increasing the better ones, and you can actually hold off cancers and fight them off much better, and and provide a lot of benefit. The cancers run on glucose, we also run on glutamine, and different levels of both. And so ketogenic diet is more effective if that particular cancer runs more on the glucose side of things than the glutamine side of things. But it's still helpful either way. And there are medications that can affect glutamine, but they're not all approved for human use, which is unfortunate. But that's something that we'll just have to get more involved in, and get more studies to show, and then try to get more treatments available for people.
Do you know any research about leukemia and how, like, white blood cells and red blood cells?
I haven't looked into the research specifically with leukemia, but from what I understand, it is something that responds very well to a ketogenic diet. Yeah. I mean, they'll all respond well, but to different varying degrees. And I believe there are different kinds of leukemia as well, but I believe that's one that's more glycolytic, runs it more on glucose, but don't quote me on that because I haven't looked into it specifically. But I do know that but I do know that it is one that does respond to ketogenic diet. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's all the questions. And thank you for being on my podcast, Anthony. Really appreciate it. And on my podcast, I always finish off with some silly questions. So, what do you prefer, beach or mountains?
I generally prefer beach, but I love mountains too, so that's a tough one for me. But yeah, I think I just like being warm, and that's why I moved to Australia.
Definitely. The next one, I usually ask like a food question, but I need to make it carnivore, I suppose. So, what do you prefer, chicken or eggs?
Probably eggs.
Yeah. And are you an early morning lark or night owl?
I was a night owl, yeah, generally. Yeah, I don't like getting up in the mornings.
Okay, thank you for being on my podcast.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me on. It's lovely to meet you.
And you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you very much.
And you. Bye.
Bye.
Yet another wonderful interview. Much obliged for you to stay and listen to Happy Go Lucky at Heart podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please keep on boasting about it to your friends and family. And if you have any spare time, please help an independent podcaster get known. So please leave a 5-star review on whichever podcast platform you listen on, and click the link in the show notes for many more ways to connect with me. Bye!